Thanks for joining us. This is yet another episode of The Economy. My name is Ibrahim Sani. We're back in my office after a week at the studio. In the office with me is a new friend of mine, Tarif Jeffrey. He's an American. Also, I just found out before the recording started that he is fluent in Thai.
Yes.
Let's do that first. Before we go the whole ex-MIT, ex-Google, co-founder of Happily.ai and other stuff that really means stuff, but
Sure.
talk to me
How
about
did that happen?
Yeah. How?
Well, I was born in Thailand. My family's been there for a few generations now. Immigrated from India in the late 1800s. But yeah, I was born
You still
there.
have roots in Thailand?
Oh yeah, I live there.
What, right now?
Yes, right now.
Oh, okay.
So I studied in the US, but I always realized that I wanted to come back home to solve problems back at home, build technology back at home, and that's what I did.
Of course, who can leave Thailand? I mean, I go to Thailand every 3 months. You know what I mean? Let's talk a little bit more about Happily.ai. What's it all about? How are you transforming enterprises as well as non-governmental organizations in terms of adopting technologies such as yours?
Yeah, I mean, it started off way back, and before I really knew that I wanted to work on this. Right? Happily is my 6th company, but all the 5 previous technology companies, I realized that solving technological problems was always pretty easy. The hardest problems to solve are people problems, and as leaders, we have very little data to understand and inform our decisions around people, right? And I really thought we should be able to solve that. So, fast forward a bit, after doing a lot of business building, I went back to grad school. I went to MIT to study people analytics, which is about taking data about people in the workplace to try to understand if we can predict certain things from happening. And ultimately, all businesses want to understand what are the factors that contribute to high-performing organizations and high-performing people. And
isn't this a little bit different, similar to econometrics and economics principles?
Yes, and I think that it translates a lot to behavioral economics, right?
Yeah.
The idea that people are irrational, but people are predictably irrational.
Yes.
So how do we then use behavioral science, combine that with data to help us actually change behaviors in the ways that we are most productive for the organization? I think that's what culture is all about. Culture is a set of values that dictate behaviors. But culture has always been seen as this very intangible thing, very hand-wavy. And so I was really curious about, hey, can we reverse engineer great cultures and actually be able to create that in any workplace that we want?
So what is the learnings that you got, not just from MIT, but from your time at Google as well, because you've been an ex-Googler?
The biggest learnings that I had from first-person learning was that great culture is centered on relationships, not around free food and benefits, right? Those are nice, but very gimmicky. You get bored of those things in like 2 weeks. But the things that you'll never forget are the relationships that you're able to build. And I'm not talking about friendships. I think a lot of times when we talk about relationships within the workplace, we misunderstand them to be, it's like we're a family, we have friends. It's not that. It's like work is a team. It should be a team sport, not a family. And in a team sport, you rely on each other. You have to have trust-filled relationships. And that's harder to build than we think, right? And so I think that was what I learned, was to create great culture isn't expensive, but it requires attention on relationships, and that's what we need to work on.
How does the data that is being collected and garnered help improve that relationships intrapersonally?
So data helps inform us on helping us really nurture that relationship.
What kind of data are we collecting here?
So at Happily, what we do is that we have daily check-ins. So within a minute or 2, you're giving feedback about how you're feeling and also around feedback on other things that are going on. And in those moments, what we're actually doing is, one, we're helping people develop better relationships with themselves. They're heightening self-awareness. A lot of times people are unhappy, but they don't know why. And it's probably because they had a bad moment 3 days ago and they haven't reflected on it yet.
Yeah.
So actually the reflection moment is really important. Right? The other thing that's really helpful is that in the questions that we've designed, there might be a question about, hey, do you need feedback right now? And maybe they'll say yes. And then now that data insight is shared with the manager saying, hey, this person might do good with feedback right now. The problem is that doesn't happen quick enough or soon enough. We rely on engagement surveys that we do once a year to learn all this stuff. It doesn't work. And so we've always, and I think that if you look at any department within an organization, we're much better at using data for everything from marketing to operations to billing to accounting. But when it comes to managing people, we don't really use data and technology, far enough. And I think that's what we're trying to solve here, is that, hey, we can manage people, build better culture if we have the right information at the right time.
And of course, you're here in KL to visit a few companies, and you've been speaking to some of them.
Yeah.
What has their reaction been? What would be some of the learnings that you got from them, from these discussions?
Yeah.
And especially, how are you going to try and see your solution try to fit their requirements as well?
I think that when I visit different markets, the thing I'm always trying to assess is like market maturity. Because certain markets, when we talk to leaders and HR teams, there might be still struggling with other layers, like operationally, either with recruiting or anything else like that. But then in Malaysia, and today, we're having conversations really about culture in the right way, right? And they understand culture not to be ping pong tables and stuff like that, or bean bags. We're talking about values. And I think that's exactly where the conversation around culture is. And that's what I feel has changed a lot over the past few years. Right? And we're hearing things about how companies want to go all in their culture and values, but maybe we don't know how to do that. I think when it comes to culture, we're stuck at like a communication strategy. We'll talk about it all the time, but it's still not part of who we are, and we don't understand why. And I think that's the type of things that we're trying to help with. Is actually, you can bring your values to life if they become part of your practices, your people practices, how we do feedback, how we do recognition. And so that's the part that we're helping embed within organizations.
But, cultures, different cultures are approaching things differently.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, the underlying issue would be having stronger relationships between people. But, sometimes one would take it as an affront in this society, but it's completely acceptable in another society. Yeah. And then, of course, work culture is extremely pliable. What constitutes as high work ethics may not necessarily be something that is appreciated in another culture. So how do you see these variances and try to build a solution where it's kind of acceptable ubiquitously across companies of different sizes and shapes?
I love that question for many reasons. Essentially, culture is a set of values, and the values will be unique to any organization. Every value comes at a cost. If you value excellence, that means that the people who are in your company have to also value excellence as well, because it comes with high expectations, a lot of critical feedback, and people who don't share excellence will feel very, very difficult to work there every day. But the people who have that as a personal value as well will feel that they're exactly where they should be. So every organization with their set of values is choosing, these are the things that we're going to value above anything else. And the stronger that you go at that, the more shared belonging that people will have at work. And that's actually something that happens. It happens easier when you have less people, right? 10 people in a room when you're like a very small startup. You don't need to do a lot of things because you're seeing and you're experiencing these values all the time. As you scale your organization, this becomes harder. And as a leader, how do you manage that? Your employees don't see you every day, but you still need to reinforce your values all the time. So that's when the right, when we apply and put that into practice with recognition feedback, it brings these values to life. So those are the things that we do. The other thing that we have to pay attention to is the social norms of a country. Certain countries will have their norms already that would either help nurture your values further or are in conflict with your values. I'll share with you, like in Thailand, our culture is very high politeness. We're very polite, but high politeness comes at a cost. Sometimes we're not as honest with other people as we should be. We don't want to give that critical feedback because we're feeling that that person might feel bad. So politeness comes at a cost. But if you want to drive innovation in a company, for example, you need to have honest feedback all the time. So the example that I think of, I think it's written somewhere, is around if you punch somebody in the face on the street, you might get arrested. But if you punch somebody in the face in a boxing ring, you get cheered. The difference is just a boxing ring. It's a social construct that says that here, this is acceptable. The same thing goes with our culture. In our organization, we have to set a certain type of social contract saying here, this is okay. And when people understand that, that's when the magic happens.
Even when, it might seem so out of place for that particular country or organization.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Tarif Jeffrey of Happily.ai. Thanks for staying on with us. I have Tarif Jeffrey of Happily.ai. Let's talk a little bit more about this social construct of when we create acceptable environments for people to behave in a way where it supports the values of that organization. Also, how does this tie with that whole notion of behavioral economics that we spoke of earlier? Especially taking something from something like a textbook understanding versus application of it in the real world using data, science, technology, AI, and many more.
So it goes really deep, and I kind of want, I guess, start with values. And everybody has a set of values, and it's very hard for any company leader to change the value system of their employee. So then what we should be doing is bringing people on board that share the same values that we do. That's when you have value alignment. And that's different than ideology. We should have different ideologies because it brings more ideas and we get to debate about them. But when we have different values that conflict, that's when things get hard. Right? We're looking at the qualitative data, and when we're looking at, for example, the question about, do you experience toxic behavior at work? A lot of people say yes. And when we ask them why, we find that a lot of them are not reporting things like bullying and gossiping. They're just saying things that go against their values. Right? We know that the younger generation value flexibility and freedom a lot more. So for them, encroaching on their work-life balance feels like toxic behavior.
Oh, okay.
Right? Whereas for other generations, that's like, no, it's normal.
No, it's normal.
Right? Different norms, different values.
Yeah, but generation friction is the most problematic issue for leaders to manage. Because generally speaking, leaders are not generally from, say, the Gen X or Gen Zs and now Generation Alpha. Does this help leaders understand the generational conflict that exists within the organizations?
Yes, because because it's about values, generations will inform the values a lot of the time, right? Predominantly, we're seeing that as we go from one generation to another, the predominant value system is changing, and then that's causing a bit of conflict. That makes it even more important why social constructs like your culture should be clear. This is what's acceptable here and this is what's not. And once people understand that, you can navigate challenging situations more easily. And every time somebody comes and goes against your values and they get reprimanded, your culture gets stronger, not weaker. But as today, when things are happening and we don't have a strong culture, when people get reprimanded, it's seen as a bad thing. It's like, oh, and then people don't want to do it. Managers don't want to go out of their way to tell someone that, hey, what you did was wrong. But when it comes to culture, you should be able to do that, right? So that's the thing that we always say, like, if you really do have a strong culture, everybody works together to uphold it because they feel it's sacred almost, right? It's their sense of belonging. And especially when your value sets are different than social norms, people will feel even more at home. Right? They're like, as soon as they walk through the doors, they're like, yep, this is where I belong. This is who I really am. And that's what we want our workplaces to be and feel like more. And then when people's values are aligned, their intrinsic motivations are the things that motivate them. Right? Today, we're relying too much on extrinsic motivation, and the more we do that, the more we erode intrinsic. All that matters is extrinsic. So, we hear things like, "Oh, I'm not paid enough to do this," because their work doesn't do anything for the intrinsic motivations. So I think there's a lot of benefit when you have these values aligned, and then having them really embedded in the workplace and day to day.
It seems like your work sits in the intersection of psychology along with technology. You are trying to make something that is subjective and fluid to become a little bit more concrete and measurable. It must be hell, right, to do this?
It was, and it still is, because the things that engage people today are different than before. So it's a very dynamic problem.
So how do you approach this?
Constant experimentation and very clear understanding of what outcomes we want, right? Because we're a data company and we care about outcomes, we know what we're measuring. For example, we're measuring employee satisfaction using employee net promoter score.
Yeah.
So we're always tracking that over time. If we're not helping companies improve that score, we're not doing our jobs right. And then that's how we know what we're doing is in the right direction. Today, we're able to improve a company's ENPS by almost 50 points, which is unheard of, right?
How do you do that? It's not possible. I've never seen it happen. This is year on year, is it? Or quarter on quarter even?
This is quarter on quarter.
No.
I'm not joking. And it surprised us when we saw it too. And the thing is, fundamentally, it shows us that it has nothing to do, like we're trying to use team building exercises to make people feel more satisfied at work.
Yeah.
Not that I'm against it or anything, but when you focus on relationships aligned with your values.
I hear people whining a lot more when they have to do team building stuff rather than enjoying
because it's
it.
not substantial for them.
Yeah.
Right? Building trust requires something else. You don't build trust just by having a barbecue after work.
Yeah.
So I think we need something else. And maybe before, when we were all working together and when there's a big challenge, we stay after work together, we suffer together almost. That's the bonds that we've built, and we started trusting each other more. Maybe those experiences are harder to come by today. But we find that, in the end of the day, satisfaction is all about, I have a certain expectation. Did you meet, or my expectation exceeded, or are you below? Mm-hmm. And when people's expectations are rising, which is what's happening today with social media and stuff, everybody's seeing what everybody else has. And now they're expecting it. Yes. Very hard to then please people. So you shouldn't try to, the way to solve that problem is to manage expectations. Mm. And so at Happily, what we've done is use behavioral science for good, where we ask people questions like, how have you gone out of your way for someone recently? We make feedback not only about what they want, but about what they've done for others. Introspection helps a lot, right? And once they answer those questions and have those conversations, the moment when you ask them what's one small thing that will make you happier at work, the feedback that they give will be a lot more balanced. But the way we do feedback today is we do it as events. Once a year, anonymous employees, and then we read all this feedback, and it's a lot of complaints, and then we're like, why are people complaining? Well, that's the only time we're not making this a conversation, and they're just basically venting out how they're feeling right now. And that's not productive. So we're actually going back to the more natural states of how to build relationships. We just need to have more meaningful conversation. And our social muscles might be weaker today than pre-COVID. So we're gonna start initiating conversations for you.
But there's also the day-to-day stuff. Productivity and efficiency is ever increasing. Demands at work, the workplace is actually has not gone down. More so now after post-COVID. So how do you keep this requirement of meeting the everyday stuff versus trying to build relationships along the way? It seems like it's not doing it automatically.
It's not, and I think the challenge that as leaders we have to ask ourselves is, if AI really can improve our productivity by 5x or 10x, what used to take 2 hours can take 10 minutes. Why isn't our organizational productivity increasing by 10x? Why is it really very much the same, or maybe questionably lower? And I think that we're trying to go fast in the wrong direction. Just because we're writing emails faster using Gen AI doesn't make our organization more productive, even though we feel that. So we have to understand, where is our bottlenecks? What is actually slowing us down right now? And we look at it, things like turnover, really bad for business. Right? The amount of time a manager has to spend training somebody new every 6 months, you're not getting any work done. That's where our bottlenecks are. So turnover is a huge cost that we're not accounting for because it's not clearly stated in the balance sheet, but it's there. Yeah. So I think that's what we're trying to do. So that we look at high-performing organizations, they just have people who are work really well together, and they've been together for a very long time. And this spills over to all types of organizations. You go to a school, and you want to understand what makes this school so great, because the teachers are happy, and they've been there for a while. If you have a school where the teachers are new every year, the students will suffer, right? So in the end of the day, I think as a business, that's what we're looking at. So we have to make sure our people are taken care of, we can retain them, and we share the right values. It's very simple, but it's very hard to execute. And I think that's where data can really help us.
It's not just hard to execute, it's also hard to sell, especially when you have FaceTime with the necessary persons like the CEO or the head of HR. there's only so much that you can cram into that space. So in an elevated pitch, how do you convey what you're doing to them?
Your culture is very, very valuable. And to invest in your culture means that you have to put in place the right practices. And that's it.
Fantastic elevated pitch, by the way. In the last few minutes that we have, maybe you can share with us some of the experiences that you have seen in other markets as well, because I want to broaden this conversation to the kind of work that you do in various markets, geographies, jurisdictions, and more.
Sure. So we're all the way in Brazil, in Canada, to Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. So it's really nice to see that there's universal constants, that we all have values drive us. It's just that different markets have different values and different social norms. But the idea that we could build social constructs that is our culture remains true. So that's been really, really nice to see. And then the encouraging thing for me is that there are leaders out there that actually, the funny thing is, I don't know if I should say this, but a lot of times when we're trying
when somebody says that, the answer is always yes, you should.
Well, I don't know.
Should always say this.
You could let me know. But the thing is, Happily is, we never have an ROI conversation about Happily. There is a clear positive ROI, but the organization that decides to use Happily is never an ROI thing. The leader just intuitively understands this. And they're like, I wish I had this 10 years ago when I started, kind of thing, right? So when it comes to culture, I think that you either already know it or you're not there yet. And the hardest thing about culture is that if you haven't ever experienced great culture, you don't know what you're missing. I know that I'm guilty of that.
Great culture, to define something great for a culture, is also subjective.
It is, but I would say that the feeling is this. If you feel like you're a fish that is swimming with the current every day, you're in a great culture. If you feel that you're a fish swimming against the current every day, you're in the wrong culture. Yeah. And so you could feel it. You just don't understand it. Right? And you ask, is that joke, right? One fish asks the other fish, how's the water? And the guy's like, what's water? Yeah. You don't know that it's there, but it's there. Yeah. But it's only when you are in a place where you feel that you're flowing with the current that you understand, oh, that's what culture is. And then that's when it's a very eye-opening moment.
Is it hard to see different cultures at different starting points? You mentioned Brazil. I'm sure you have a presence in Southeast Asia, I suppose. Yeah. So how does it jive with all this happening around the world?
Yeah, I think that, again, different organizations will come in with different challenges. A lot of times we do work with organizations that are already struggling quite a bit. Right? Very low eNPS. Yeah. They know they can't retain anyone, but they care enough to change. And within three months, they turn things around. They start having the right conversations. Their employees start to understand why they're really there, and it makes a lot more sense.
Of course, because I've never thought about it that way. When you ask a window of an EES once a year, it's just a bunch of complaints, and you're just reading through the complaints, and all you get as a leader is, boy, I've done really terribly this year, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's how it's been done. Yes. And in the KPI, there's 4%, 5% or whatever the KPI is, and then you just want to get it over and done with. So you do it, and you get it over and done with. Yeah. With no lessons from it. No. Is it expensive to implement these kind of things?
No, I mean, we primarily, we started off just working with SMBs because we knew that they struggled the most. Yeah. Right? It's the more, I guess larger companies have larger budgets to spend on these kind of things. And we're like, let's...
Also more personnel to execute it,
exactly, right? We work with organizations all sizes, but I really empathize with the leader who has like and then maybe just 2 HR people who are just running payroll and they don't have time.
Sorry, you're describing my company right now.
Okay, sorry. But I really empathize with that leader.
Both of them doing payroll and recruitment, and if there's a turnover,
right? And it just burdens everybody a bit more when there's even one or two. No. I don't believe that, But yes, that's what we've built it for. It's like we made it really easy and affordable because culture is we should come to work every day feeling happier and healthier, and it's possible. And it shouldn't be a very big investment to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, it should come naturally, I suppose.
It should come naturally.
Yeah, just like checking emails.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That was Tarif Jeffrey of Happily.ai. If you want to learn more, just head off to their website and find out more about that there. Also, we want to keep this conversation going on. Just reach out to my socials and send your questions over to me on this show as well as this particular interview. And also keep your keep your ears on the ground in terms of what you want from the upcoming announcements from the federal government, including the 13th Malaysia Plan. As we know, the 13th Malaysia Plan is going to be rolled out very, very soon. So we want to hear your voices and thoughts on that. Until then, catch you in the next one.